On his first day at the White House, President-elect Joe Biden plans to recommit the US to the Paris Climate Agreement, which incumbent President Donald Trump decided wasn't for America, along with the science of climate change, which he has flatly rejected over the years. Reassuming leadership in climate action is one of Joe Biden's biggest campaign promises, backed by a $2 trillion plan to invest in green infrastructure, vehicles and energy sources that will make the US a net zero society by the year 2050. But as Biden deals with a devastating pandemic, a flailing economy and possibly a divided government, can he lead world efforts to tackle climate change? We discuss this today with Chung So-young, Professor of the Division of International Studies at Korea University, and Rachel A. Madel, Fellow in Energy and Environment at Rice University's Baker Institute. Thank you both so much for joining us today. And to go straight into the questions, let's begin with you, Dr. Chung. For the last 4 years, Donald Trump has denied that climate change is real, and as we all know, he supported the coal industry and he's rather infamously pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord. How much damage have his antics done to multilateral efforts and morale in making our world sustainable? And how far is the world from meeting the crucial 2030 targets under the Paris Agreement?
Well, it was very unfortunate for President Trump actually to pull out of the Paris Accord once he was elected before, and then because of the ongoing the leadership that was taken care by the United States, it was a huge damage to international political leadership in mobilizing political efforts to push all the countries to meet the target that they agreed in Paris before. So in the sense that it was very unfortunate. And even if there are many American citizens who are continuously working to address climate change. At the same time, morally, it posed some of the moral questions to some of the people who might be questioned why United States is out and that there is something wrong with the current efforts. So in the sense that it affected on some of the moral aspect of the climate efforts at the global level.
And Dr. Madel, now Joe Biden has pledged to rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement and aims to turn the US into a net zero society. And these, of course, would be very positive developments, but some have criticised his measures won't be as strong as those mentioned in the Green New Deal drafted by some of the people in his party. I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, first off, no nation can deal with the effects of climate change alone, and reasserting U.S. leadership on the global stage is really critical for securing collective action. With respect to the Green New Deal, many of the baseline concepts are also addressed in Biden's climate plan, such as promoting justice and equity in vulnerable populations, but it's not an apples-to-apples comparison. The difference really is in size, scope, and strategy. The Green New Deal is a blueprint. It's not a detailed plan with prescribed policy elements or even a budget. It was introduced as a broad, sweeping, and non-binding resolution written without specifics as to how the government would actually implement and execute its goals. So it comes with an aggressive and unattainable timeline, and it ushers in a whole host of unquantified impacts from a life cycle basis, if assessed from a sustainability lens. But outside of both of these strategies, there's already increased momentum on climate issues. The public has a strong interest in this, and companies are already instituting plans to become responsible stewards of the environment. So they're setting their own net zero carbon goals, and they're investing heavily in renewables. But there are some things that he can do. Aside from re-entering the Paris Accord, we can expect the Biden administration to strengthen the country's commitments to the UN Sustainable Development Goals and rebuilding diplomatic alliances. And that's going to spur foreign countries to pursue more ambitious carbon reductions.
And Dr. Madel, well, the challenges, though, the key industries such as the auto industry and power industry, do you think the Biden administration will be able to broker compromises with these sectors?
Well, achieving an effective climate plan is contingent on working collaboratively with stakeholders on practical solutions. What those look like and how we'll get there under Biden is unclear, whether it's, raising fuel economy standards to expedite the transition to electric vehicles or directing agencies to tighten emission standards for the energy sector. We just don't know yet. But as I mentioned, industries are already receiving, pressure from investors and consumers. To decarbonize. And, That could increase if Biden can harness public opinion to support further efforts to green the grid. It's really uncertain if he will be able to execute on the climate policies, given, the configuration of Congress. But what we'll likely see is the offering of carrots to industry in the form of tax incentives, new subsidies, perhaps grants to accelerate the production of low carbon technologies, research dollars and things like that. For example, his climate and energy plan, he's accelerating carbon capture storage by doubling down on federal investments and enhancing tax incentives. Well, Congress is going to need to be a part of this and pass legislation to extend what is known as the 45Q tax credits. His support, could increase funding for projects under the Energy Department, and also increasing funding for Environmental Protection Agency, particularly around the permitting issues with injection of CO2.
And Dr. Chong, how would you evaluate Biden's pledges on tackling climate change? Do you see them as mostly a welcome development? And what further actions or commitments are you hoping to see from the US?
I've been looking at the progress that President-elect Biden has taken care of in terms of the strengthening the climate policy in the United States. Many things looked really good, and then those things that must have been done actually before by the President Trump, even if it seems to be a little bit late, but I'm sure that President Biden will catch up to take all these things on the right track. However, if I would like to add one more element that I'd like to emphasize on is the U.S. leadership in strengthening international cooperation. It is somewhat unfortunate to see at the global level that many countries are working on addressing climate change in the context of green recovery or green new deal, whatever you call. But most of the efforts have been done focusing on domestic affairs. So in other words, that considering that we are aiming at realizing free economy at the global level, it's very important for from the beginning, even by the United States, is to put a lot of emphasis on making things global and international, in the sense that I do hope that President Biden would put more elements to emphasize the international cooperation aspect of these issues. Especially, it is very critical for the U.S. to come back to the UN system, especially Green Climate Fund. As we all know, that the United States has pulled out of the Green Climate Fund, along with some other UN organizations, in terms of the financial contributions and their political leadership. So it's very critical for the U.S. to come back to the those organizations as not only the political leader, but also financial contributor. Also lead some of the international efforts to strengthen again the international cooperation among the countries.
Since the early 2010s, South Korea has been playing a very active role in the global community in making the transition to a net zero society. And you were actually an active part of these efforts, serving on the Council of the Global Green Growth Institute and the UN's Basel Convention's Compliance Committee. Do you see any common challenges or areas of development that South Korea and the US could strongly collaborate on, as both countries are aiming to make a green recovery from this pandemic?
Well, that's a very good point. Actually, there is one factor that many people actually don't know. If you take a look at the previous, declaration made by the two summits, President of the Republic of Korea and then the President of the United States, actually there were many agreements about the climate change cooperation before. And then the question was whether or not there has been the sufficient enough the level of the cooperation to realize all these political commitments made by two summits. In this context, I'd like to see several items that already can be overlapped between the two countries in terms of the addressing climate change and then in the context of the green recovery. We can list several things such as introducing electric vehicle, promoting low carbon transportation, and then working on the developing green cities. And then one important factor is that Korea is putting a lot of emphasis on hydrogen economy. I'm sure that the United States has a good level of the technology in this matter. And then power sector, not only energy efficiency matters, renewables will be the key for both countries. So we can go to the detailed discussions on how we can make all these listed items actually realized by the two countries, not only by the government level, but also by bringing a lot of private sectors involved. And lastly, it could be controversial to talk about, but one interesting possibility is that what about working on the North Korea in the context of the forestry and the low carbon transportation? Because these are two matters that have been discussed actually largely not only by South Korea, but at the international level on how we can actually open the North Korea, and so that we can bring them in a peace-building process as well. I do hope that President Biden might consider some of the possibility even of bringing this sort of the soft agenda to deal with the North Korea nuclear weapon issues. So these are some of the things that we can consider.
Well, the possibilities there seem boundless. And Dr. Maydor, as the US plans to go net zero, what are some key policy considerations that will have to be made during this transition to ensure that the technologies and the infrastructure are truly sustainable all throughout the life cycle?
Well, any and all energy policies should evolve from life cycle learnings, as well as the reality of geopolitics. Sustainability is not just assessing impacts within our own borders, it's taking a holistic look at all impacts throughout the entire life cycle. This is where our current policies fail. The low carbon, zero emission technologies such as wind, solar, and lithium ion batteries for electric vehicles and energy storage, they all require significant mineral extraction, and they have to be refined, processed, transported, and converted. All very energy intensive processes and metrics we're currently not capturing. The U.S. is nearly 100% dependent on foreign sources for mining and processing, most located in parts of the world with very high rates of fragility, conflict, and corruption. And this presents unquantified social and environmental injustices in countries with very weak or absent environment, safety, and labor laws. So this ushers in political, national security, and trade risks. And we don't have the scale technology to manage these products at the end of life. The wind turbine blades that are being decommissioned and the solar panels, they're being landfilled. Lithium-ion batteries from electric vehicles and consumer products are being stockpiled and incinerated. All of this runs counter to sustainability and circular economy principles. Our current net zero strategies, we don't account for sustainability outside of our borders. It simply shifts the risk to another part of the supply chain. We need to build policies that quantify these impacts to understand what these trade-offs are and how a technology that's being sold as a solution behaves throughout its life, in particular the end of life.
And Dr. Jung, your book in 2013 actually set out the way forward from 2020 in revamping the world's climate change regime. You suggested that the legal structure of the regime might actually have little impact on effectiveness, and Donald Trump there appears to have proved you right. And while going beyond 2020, do you have any ideas on how countries of various shapes and sizes can continue to keep committed and on track to meeting the Paris climate goals?
Well, my immediate answer to the question is that let's go back to the UNFCCC process. In general, not necessarily in the field of climate change, I see some of the falling apart the process of the efforts have been done by the countries in general. So it is time for us to re-strengthen the multilateral process. Here, the starting point in case of climate change is to strengthen the process of UNFCCC. Not only because of the pulling out of the UNFCCC process by the United States, but also because of the pandemic, the COVID-19, UNFCCC process has been weakened a little bit at this time. So if United States and along with all the countries in the world can go back to the UNFCCC process and then identify what are the necessary elements that we must strengthen together, together with the United States and Korea, and then how we can help. Actually, this is important. how we can help the developing countries, because these days all these good ideas about the tackling climate change and the green recovery are based on the just transition and inclusiveness concepts. So in the sense that it is very necessary and important for us to work together with the developing world as well. They are not only those who are in need of help at this time, but actually they are the future markets. So everybody needs to work together to help the developing countries so that we can probably share the good benefits that we can generate in the future. So going back to UNFCCC, strengthening the UNFCCC process, I think that this is the best and then the most important thing that we must work on at this time.
Right, so the key message there from both of you, we need to work together, and tackling climate change isn't a lone battle, and it really requires all this collaboration that you both mentioned. Well, I'm afraid this is where we're going to have to leave the discussion today. That was Chung So-young, Professor at the Division of International Studies of Korea University, and Rachel A. Madel, Fellow in Energy and Environment at Rice University's Baker Institute. Thank you both so much for your time.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, thank you for watching.